numbers. The numbers speak for themselves.
Were you high when you sued Chris Kyle's widow?
Was I high? You know, that's a question, and I expect it from someone from Fox.
Just
no.
a serious question.
No, it ain't. No, it ain't, because I never sued the widow. I sued him.
Okay, well, she's suffering a lot of pain right now.
No, she isn't.
How do you know that?
Because insurance pays for it all. She hasn't paid 1 cent. How do I know it? It's my case.
So you stand by that?
The case got overturned because the truth came out. Insurance is paying for all of it. It isn't costing his family a cent. That's the way legal works if you do your homework.
Would you apologize to her?
No, she should apologize to me for the lie that her husband told about me. Why would I apologize? I didn't do anything. You only apologize if you've done something wrong, pal.
Do you believe individuals should be able to own shoulder-mounted RPGs, civilians?
That's a rocket. That's not a gun. That's not a handgun.
Okay, so given that, I'm hearing then that
I'm talking about firearms.
Okay, fair enough, Governor.
I'm
so
not
in
talking
that case,
about army tanks. I'm not talking about.
So therefore,
okay, all right. Well, shouldn't we start doing background checks then on people that buy manure because you can make bombs out of them?
But the question I'm really getting to, Governor, is in the context of this kind of fighting back against the government. If you are limiting individual civilians simply to what you have now described as firearms, it doesn't really stand to reason that those would be effective against Apache helicopters, tanks, so on and so forth, does it?
Well, it did in Vietnam.
But it's a very different situation there, Governor. And the other difference there also is that...
It's people. No, it isn't. It's people fighting to be free. It's people fighting to be self-governed, to govern themselves. That's what the Vietnam people were fighting over.
Yeah, but Governor, you also have to consider...
What's that?
I think you have to consider also when it comes to Vietnam that the strategy from the Vietnamese was simply to get as many American casualties as possible, knowing that the U.S. had a limit to the number of people they were willing to lose. So it would be a very different situation to say that those weapons are going to keep the American government from becoming tyrannical against its own people. I just don't see the connection.
Really? Well, then why is it that these genocides happen in countries where the government genocides their people and kills them in masses? They always happen in countries where guns are outlawed.
But Governor, you're cherry picking that bit of data.
Okay, this is good discussion. Let's go back to World War II.
No, but hold on, Governor. Before we do that, you're cherry picking only a fact about guns when there are so many other factors in countries that lead to oppression by the government or don't lead to oppression by the government that have nothing to do with guns.
Okay, let's throw in the whole destruction of our Bill of Rights.
Well, that's a different discussion. That's a different discussion.
People were protesting. What happened? The government came in with pepper spray and dogs and ran them off. There went the First Amendment that guaranteed you the right to protest.
No, well, now, Governor, now you're getting
the Fourth Amendment, a reasonable search and seizure. They're now flying drones over us. They've got us under surveillance.
Governor, I totally am going to be more in agreement with you. We're kind of switching issues, though. I feel like these are different issues.
Destruction of our Bill of Rights here.
I think that each one of these is a different issue.
Let's disarm the public because we're going to keep you safe and we're going to take care of you. You don't need to have these guns. They're too dangerous for you to have.
Wars are very profitable to certain big businesses. And, of course, big business needs to be in the Middle East so that we can get the oil out of the Middle East, so we can get the lithium out of Afghanistan. You know, they discovered a vein of lithium there they say is worth $1 trillion. Well, what is lithium used for? Every cell phone, computer, and soon to be electric cars. Let's talk about why we're really there. We're not there. How does any of these wars affect our freedom in any way? The United States is not in any threat. They're not going to do a Normandy invasion on us, Al-Qaeda in Virginia.
No, but hang on, you're being slightly naive, aren't you? Because
I'm not being naive, sir.
I think you are being naive.
No.
Because I think that it's clear one of the main reasons that America went into Afghanistan was to try and get Al-Qaeda dismantled, the organization which committed the 9/11 atrocity.
Really?
Well, you don't think so?
Well, how come Al-Qaeda put the heroin business out? They took all the poppy growers and stopped the production of heroin.
What would you have done?
Wait, now how much of that illegal heroin was propping up the international banks with laundered money, and when it dried up, the first recession happened? Well, now that we're back in there, we aligned with the poppy growers, and the heroin business is back up full swing again. I thought we fight a war on drugs here.
All right, Jesse,
Seems we're not.
What would you have done on September the 12th, 2001? What would you have done if you'd been president?
What would I have done?
Yeah.
I would have done a legitimate investigation to find out what exactly happened on 9/11. How did they know who did this so quickly like they did Lee Harvey Oswald? How quick they knew Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy.
Because the people who did it were identified and we knew who they were.
Well, then why couldn't we have stopped them beforehand if they were identified and we knew who they were?
It was a failure of intelligence. Everyone's accepted
No, it
that.
wasn't. We knew before with Condoleezza Rice's memo on August 6th when it stated right in the memo, bin Laden to steal planes and run them into buildings. And more stuff is coming out now also, how much the Bush administration ignored the intelligence. It was almost like they ignored it because they wanted it to happen.
Oh, come off it, Jesse.
No, not oh, come off it.
Don't be ridiculous.
Wait a minute. Every war fought starts with a false flag operation.
You can't, in all seriousness, sit there and try and make out anybody.
Okay, let me ask you this, Piers. Wait a minute. Let me ask you something. How much studying have you actually done of 9/11 other than what the government's told you and what mainstream media has told you? I've been studying it 4 years.
I was editor of a national newspaper.
I've talked to people.
Wait a minute. In depth every day for 5-6 months.
Really?
So I know a lot about it.
Well,
one thing I do know is.
Let me ask you this.
You cannot say that any member of the Bush administration knew it was going to happen or wanted it to happen. It's a ridiculous thing to say.
Ridiculous. Okay, let's talk about your BBC. I have a tape of a BBC reporter broadcasting directly back to England talking about a third building has collapsed. World Trade Center Building 7 talks for 7 minutes. All the while she's talking, World Trade Center Building 7 is still standing right behind her. It didn't fall for another half hour. Yet they were doing a pre-broadcast back to England that, yes, it's true,
you need to
that this building fell and it hadn't fallen yet.
The reason I voted for Dr. Stein, I'll tell you why. I went with the Green Party because she fulfilled my top 3. My top 3 were getting out of the Middle Eastern wars, ending the war on drugs, and starting a war on climate change.
Well, to be fair, we interviewed her, and I agree with 2 of those 3. She said, look, if you don't vote for me, vote for Trump because Hillary wants World War III. I mean, anybody who was honest said Trump was better just because of that.
Well, I don't know any of those quotes. I didn't hear the show or anything like that. That also worries me, though. Trump's supposedly going to put a guy in charge of the EPA that doesn't think we're polluting at all.
Jesse, this is where the rubber. We're going to break one more segment with you, and we'll talk about your book in the final segment. But just let me throw this at you. I get that humans are doing GMO and toxic waste dumping and real problems. A carbon tax is on carbon dioxide that the plants breathe. It only shuts off our power plants, Governor. It's not.
The thing is, though, here's the deal, Alex. It's this simple. Scientific fact, undisputable, can't be denied. The more carbon there is in the air, the higher the temperatures will be. And right now, the atmosphere has the most carbon in the air that has ever been recorded. Now, a lot of that comes from the Earth itself, but certainly a lot of it is mass-produced by us. So, to me, it's an important thing.
Well, let's talk about when we come back. But you said something key.
Oil's an old energy.
I hear you.
Human beings, it's time for us to go.
We got to go to break.
They're all the same. Most of these media guys are all a bunch of chicken hawks. You know what a chicken hawk is, don't you?
Tell our audience what a chicken hawk is.
Well, a chicken hawk is a person when it was their time to serve and go to war and be in the military, they were chicken. But they come back 20, 25 years later, and now they're hawks. They want to go to war. They want to kick everyone's butt because they don't have to do it now.
Was Bill O'Reilly?
That's a chicken hawk.
Bill O'Reilly and I are not friends, but in fairness to him, did he ever duck out on service or anything? Do we have any proof about him being a chicken?
He never served. Neither did Hannity. Neither did Limbaugh. Do you want the list to go on with all these guys that support the war and support kicking butt?
There's a difference.
And none of them ever did it themselves.
That's the kind of the Colin Powell school of thought. But there's a difference between guys who weren't called to serve versus guys avoiding serving.
Weren't called. Everyone turns 18.
Okay, the fact that they didn't volunteer.
Where do you get the fact that you weren't called? It's called go down and enlist and then serve your country.
Well, there's a difference.
You call it, not someone else.
But just because somebody doesn't volunteer for the military doesn't mean they're a chicken versus somebody who was drafted and avoids the draft. That's a little bit of a different discussion, I think.
No, it isn't.
No?
Somebody that doesn't volunteer for the military and then comes back 20 years later and wants to go kick everyone's butt with the military, that's a chicken hawk.
Okay.
How many of this audience personally, financially, feel genuinely better off after 4 years? If you do, applaud. Okay. And if you don't, applaud now. So, you know, it's probably about 50-50. So half of this...
I got that at about 70-30.
Let's put it at 60-40.
All right, I'll
Maybe
compromise.
60-40. But whatever it was, certainly a number of people in the room would agree they're not better off.
Okay, but let's get to brass tacks here. And again, I'm the independent. In the economy, things that are done 3, 4, 5 years ago show up today. So when the recession of 08 hit, which Barack Obama inherited, Bush did the first bailout. That was because it hit in 08 because of decisions done in 03, 04, when you had a Republican president, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate.
People have such short memories. If they go back to the Republican rule, that was 2000 when we had the largest attack in U.S. history took place. We got involved in 2 wars that we're still fighting that are not winnable, and the economy was completely tanked. And people want to go back to that? I don't.
Well, time's going to tell.
I don't, Alex. I hope Donald brings in new people. I hope he does what he said, drains the swamp and starts. That's the mandate he got, was from the people to go in there and change Washington as we know it. And to do that, that don't mean Rudy Giuliani, Newt Gingrich, and this cast of characters.
I absolutely agree with you. The argument is that they know how the thing runs so that he'll be able to basically get what he wants as an executive, having them carry out his will. And so they're like the janitor that knows where everything is in the building.
I don't buy into that, having governed. I don't buy, if you're bringing back the old guard, then, and now they're going to try to overturn Roe v. Wade and send that back to the states, which appears like a fair thing to do until you realize that then poor women won't have access to that type of procedure because they won't be able to afford to go to
Sure, Jesse, you can't have marijuana sent back to the States. You can't have marijuana sent back to the States and stuff like that and then not have abortion sent back. I mean, that's where it's supposed to be.
Well, if you're going to be consistent that way, but again, like I said, for women in poor states, if they decide not to allow it, then they're going to be in a tough situation where rich women it won't be a problem for because they could go to whatever state they need to if they desire that to do that type of thing.
All I know.
Me on that? So it will discriminate against the poor.
Let me throw something out. You can't take a civil rights issue and put it up to a vote. If you did that, we might still have slavery if it was allowed to be voted on.
Fair point.
Jesse,
You can't take civil rights and let people vote on it.
Well, Jesse, what are you talking about? The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was voted on. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was voted on by Congress. The Open Housing Act of 1968 was done by LBJ. Pursuant to demonstrations by Martin Luther King. These were done by the representatives of the people, not by these unelected judges.
Well, and not by the populace itself, Pat. Fine, if the elected officials will stand up for what's right and do what's right with civil rights like they did back then, I fully agree with you. But you can't put a civil rights issue on the general ballot in a state and let people vote on it. And the government only has a theory.
Right, well, the government has
No, this
factual...
is a theory. Their theory is 19 Islamic radicals armed with box cutters defeated our multi-billion-dollar air defense system, all while conspiring with a bearded guy in a cave in Afghanistan.
That is exactly what
That's
happened.
their theory.
No, that's not a theory. It's a fact.
That's their theory.
No, Jesse,
that's a
it's
fact.
That's what happened.
Really?
Yes, I'm
Were
sorry
you there?
to kill your conspiracy theories, but that is what happened.
Then why haven't anyone been brought up for trial?
Because
They
all
haven't
died.
given one shred of
They all
evidence in
died.
a trial.
In case you missed the story.
Well, then
They
what do
all
we got
died.
all these guys in Gitmo for? And we got the supposed confessor to it, who they waterboarded 180 times to get the confession. Got news for you, Piers. If they waterboarded you 180 times, you'd confess to it.
One thing that I read in the book that I just totally found just alien to me is this idea that you believe in 9/11 conspiracies, that you...
Well, let me tell it to you this way. Why is it that when you ask any question about 9/11, you're immediately attacked?
I'm not attacking you.
You're not, but no, I'm speaking in general. I'm not saying you guys, but I've watched people get attacked. People have their credibility attacked. My problem is I look at it and I go, how can 2 planes knock down 3 buildings?
Pretty easy. Those are 747.
But there were 3 buildings that went down.
Well, there was a lot of fire and there was a lot of damage.
Well,
and
first of all, jet fuel blew up at the start. Jet fuel is 4/5, and I don't want to stay on this. I'd rather talk other things.
Yeah.
But jet fuel is 4/5 kerosene. It doesn't burn hot. So using the analogy that it could melt the metal, then propane burns hotter. So if you turn on your camp stove for 3 hours, shouldn't it melt the grates? But it doesn't, does it?
I want to take one issue with...
It doesn't.
I want to...
And I just question...
He's going Rosie O'Donnell on
and
me
I
here.
do, you know, wait a minute.
That's Rosie O'Donnell.
Well, I know a little bit. How can they fall at the rate of gravity?
Look,
they fell at the rate of
I'm not
gravity
an engineer.
in powder. They blew into powder. My president already stated that we won. He stood on the deck of an aircraft carrier and told me so. Then, of course, they said we'd be greeted like liberators, which we weren't. They said that Iraqi oil would pay for the war, which it hasn't. Why should I then believe these people who have not been right once since this war started?
Has he got a point, Michael?
You know, Jesse, I've got something here for you, really. Maybe you'll recognize. You know, you've always been a predator, and nothing's changed. But let me just say this. You know, taking
If you
Jesse's
didn't see it,
idea...
Jesse, it's a little statue of you.
It's statue, in the Predator.
You're not laughing, Jesse. It's cute.
But, you know, Jesse should know this.
It is,
You could use that argument, Larry, with every war we have ever fought. You can go back to the Second World War, you go back to Pearl Harbor, the Battle of the Bulge. You go through all those things.
When they bombed Pearl Harbor, we didn't announce we won.
But wait a minute, you're right. Did George Bush make an absolute faux pas with the whole thing on the Abraham Lincoln? Absolutely right. He certainly did. But you know, we're there. You just don't walk away. Battle of the Bulge, you name a war that we haven't, in fact, been in trouble and had to change things like we changed with the surge.
I think it's an obscenity to hold up a doll, whether it's a Jesse Ventura or anyone. You know why? Because 1 out of 5 returning veterans, if that doll represents a veteran, have post-traumatic stress disorder or brain injury, and we have a candidate, McCain. We have a candidate of McCain who is unwilling to support the men and women who have served this country with a GI Bill. But the main thing...
Have you been to Walter Reed Army Hospital? Have you been to Walter Reed Army Hospital?
The Nation magazine reporter just won... The Nation magazine's reporter has spent a year working with veterans who've been denied disability veterans. I have
you been there?
But I'm not. I'm speaking.
Have you not been there? I've been there 4 times.
Michael, let me just
finish. 4 times. So don't come at me about
Michael,
you've been to the hospital. Well, why don't you chicken hawks go fight the war for a change?
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
You know, going to the hospital's one thing, but I don't see these hardcore Republicans. They were draft dodgers during Vietnam. Senator Norm Coleman's your classic chicken hawk from Minnesota, protested the war in Vietnam. Hell no, he wouldn't go. Well, his slogan today should be, hell yes, clean up my mess.
I personally like the Electoral College because it doesn't let another state dominate it, and it keeps the electioneering in control in compartmentalized pieces and makes election fraud harder. Bev Harris, the top...
That's the biggest baloney. That, you know, okay, then why don't we do it that way for other elections?
Okay, well, I had Bev Harris.
How come president is the only election where the people don't pick them? See, that's the fix. The people don't pick the president. Delegates do.
Well, we already tried with the superdelegates to block that.
1700, they had to go by horseback to Washington.
Sure.
Well, nobody's going on horseback anymore that I know of.
Sure. Let me just get this out, though. You know Bev Harris. She's very respected. They've even done a TV show about her. But the point is, HBO documentary, she's a liberal Democrat. She said clearly that Hillary probably stole 5 states that night, and that there was massive fixing against Trump. So she's discovered the latest...
You know, Alex, I don't buy into that because I was a governor, and we did vast studies when I was a governor that showed voter fraud. If voter fraud happens, it will happen at the electronic voting machine.
I agree, election fraud.
Which need to be gotten rid of. Some things don't improve with time.
So you know about everything that happened before 9/11, but right now when you have Iran potentially nuking itself up, you don't have an opinion.
Well, let's leave that up to the nuclear inspectors that go in there. They will tell us whether they're nuking it up before you decide to bomb them.
I didn't decide to bomb anybody.
No, but you seem to be very favorable.
You're trying to put words into my mouth all the time, which is it's not a very good technique when you're debating with somebody. Just stick to facts.
How many political offices have you held?
None.
Then don't tell me how to debate, because I've held 2.
Oh, I've debated many times.
But you've never won an election where a debate was required.
I think you make some very sensible points, and you make some crackpot points.
That's your opinion?
Yes.
How many people here think I make crackpot points?
Yeah.
1. How many think I make sensible points?